Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Access to Democracy returns. I'm your host, Alan Miller, and we have with us a return guest today. There is nothing that I enjoy more than the American success story. Paul Werni is really the American success story. He first joined us in 2010. He had a dream. He gave up the business that he had and decided he wanted to become a distiller. Went to Europe, studied with some of the world's famous distillers, studied their products, studied their methods, came back here. He's from Minneapolis. He wanted to set up a distillery in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, at the time, Minneapolis prices were prohibitive. I will say, as a result of the success he's made, things are changing. And so he went to Wisconsin and set up a 45th Parallel Spirits distillery where they started to make vodka, which happened to be the drink that I drink when I do drink, pure corn vodka. And his processes for really purifying it and making sure that it's perfect are terrific. In fact, Sharon and I recently visited out there and were blown away by the operation that he has there, which has just doubled in size. So Paul was with us once before as they branched into one or two more products, and he's here today at the end of 2013, having enjoyed his best year and on his way to becoming a tycoon.
I think we're a little bit a ways from that, but thank you for your kind words so far. Thanks.
So, I was correct, right? You wanted to make a vodka, and you went about it.
Exactly. At the time, the vodka was the fastest growing market in the liquor industry. Premium vodkas were outpacing everything else combined. And so nobody else was making vodka in this region, so that's what we decided to do. We wanted to, like as you said, we were looking at locations in northeast Minneapolis. That's where I live. And I still live in Minneapolis, and there's a lot of brewing going on there right now, but the permit fees were so high that you couldn't start a distillery in Minnesota. That's why there weren't any in Minnesota. But that's changed.
And I've talked to R.T. Ryback about that at the time. Unfortunately, you had set up your business already, and you're in New Richmond, Wisconsin, which is not that far away. It's 45 minutes from Eagan, I mean, when we went to visit you. And they have changed that prohibitive startup price so that there are, in effect, competitors of yours who are going into business now.
About a year and a half ago, the law was changed, and it was reduced from $30,000 a year to about $2,000 a year.
Slight difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference, and Wisconsin's $1,000 a year, Iowa's $500 a year, so the surrounding states were already in that realm. Now you have Panther Distillery opening up in Osakis. They've been making a lot of whiskey. They have a lot of capacity. And you have a distillery in Duluth that's opened up recently. There's one planned in Northfield, Arden Hills, Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's going to be 10 distilleries in this state in the next couple of years.
Well, we were talking before we went on air, and you said that doesn't threaten you, however, that helps your business.
It does. Well, we've been finding that our best markets are in areas that have other small distilleries. So what you have is you have awareness. They might write an article on it, in a newspaper, a magazine, talk about it on the radio. The local restaurants and the chefs and the bartenders start looking for this sort of thing. When there's only one of you around, they're not sure how to deal with you. They're not sure if you're any good. And then when they start seeing success stories all around, and they start, hey, that's what we want. That's more breweries. It breeds more people looking for small beer.
And for instance, we just found out that the Radisson Blu Hotel features 45th Parallel vodka.
Yeah, and we're getting more and more of that. We've grown to a point where we're able to employ full-time salespeople, and it's just getting them in front of the buyers at these locations and letting the buyers know that we're there. And then once they taste it, then they start staffing it.
So your next step was to try your hand at a bourbon.
Yeah, we started getting into the aged spirits. We were hired to make aged spirits for somebody else. And then we started making it for ourselves. So this year, we're up to about 220 53-gallon barrels are aging right now.
And we saw in your establishment all these barrels, very specific kind of barrels.
White oak barrels. And the reason why you have white oak is it seals well, and the government wants oak. That's what they require for American-style whiskeys. And our wood comes from Missouri. It's Ozark white oak, and because many of the biggest cooperages in the world are in that location. We could buy barrels in Minnesota, and there's been a lot of recent articles about them. And the difference between the barrels out of Minnesota and the barrels in Missouri are the barrels in Minnesota tend to be smaller, 5, 10, 15-gallon barrels, whereas we're looking for the larger barrels, the 53-gallon barrels, and those are more commonly found down south.
And you have many barrels of bourbon that are aging.
Yes. For example, we're over 100 barrels of bourbon right now, about 120 barrels. And we have 100 barrels of mixture of rye and wheat whiskeys. And but the bourbon that's what we started making, and that is what the market really wants too. We sell 3 bottles of bourbon for every bottle of rye. The public likes the bourbon because it's a little bit sweeter.
It's funny the way those things are cyclical, though. It used to be gin that people favored, and then it moved to vodka. And here it was rye, and now people have moved to bourbon. Well,
I think bourbon is designated the American spirit. In 1964, bourbon was designated the American spirit. It has to be made in the United States. It has to be made from corn. Actually, rye is on its way up right now. If you were to go to a restaurant or a bartender, they're looking for a good rye, and that's where we sell our ryes.
Now, we have someplace there, we have an aquavit.
Yes.
When did you start making aquavit?
A couple of years ago, a third of our business is contract work, so that means we make alcohol for other people. And we had a company ask us to make some aquavits. And they're out of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we make 3 aquavits for them. And this is the aged one. This is called Holiday. In Holiday, it starts with a dill aquavit. It has caraway, and it has mint and allspice, and it's aged in sherry cask. That's why it has color.
And you had all those spices and all those materials there, and it was really fascinating to me. And we should mention that there are tours available for people to really see this operation. It's only 45 minutes from this area, and it's fascinating to see how they're all blended and they come out in something like the aquavit.
Yeah, if you want a tour, the best thing to do is go to our website. It's 45thparallelspirits.com. There's a section that explains when the tours are, and you can sign up right there. We take reservations because we have a small tasting area, and we don't want too many people there at one time, and we want people to have a good experience, be able to sample what we have. And one of the good things about our tours are they're given by distillers. And we don't hire somebody to give tours. We have 6 people that work at our facility, and there's 3 of us that are active distillers, and it's one of us three that gives the tours.
Now, let's talk about background. This was an idea of yours, and at the time, your father was on board.
Yeah.
He has since passed, unfortunately. Tell us how you got into it, what you did, and how it resulted in what we see in front of us.
Well, I did some home brewing. That was interesting, but I really liked the manufacturing aspect of distilling. And so you make if you're going to make a whiskey, you make a beer and you distill it. And it's much more of a manufacturing type facility. And that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be creative because my previous job was somewhat creative. I did some design work and we did build. So it was landscape construction. And my business partner was a landscape architect. So then I decided to start this. And it was a 2-year process from the time I decided to do it and to the time we were actually received our billing and our permits and were allowed by the government to make alcohol.
And that's a federal license, is it not?
It's federal and state. First you get your federal permits, and then they're called permits. And so you have to have your equipment and your facility in order before they'll come out and take a look at it and decide whether or not they want to grant you a permit. And once you get a permit from the federal government, then you have to go to your state. And when you have your permit number from the feds, and then the state will consider you. It wasn't that hard. It was time consuming, a lot of paperwork. But
we live in a bureaucratic world.
Yeah. Well, alcohol, especially distilled spirits, there's a lot of money involved. So they, for example, a bottle will get the government about $2.80. And if you have millions of bottles, that's a lot of money.
So the more you sell, the more it helps the economy.
Yes, you will, as I said before many times, you will never see prohibition again because there's too much money involved. There's a lot of taxes involved.
Now, you also, and we don't have a display here, but you also make a gin.
Yes, our gin is a Midwest gin, and it's becoming more and more I probably should have brought it. I mean, just ought to get out. Because it is selling more and more in the metro, in the Minneapolis metro, and more restaurants are picking it up and using it as their pour.
We've looked at the bourbon. It was interesting because we visited you with our friends, the Rakers, and Bill is from Kentucky,
Yes.
and he insisted that nobody but a Kentuckian can make bourbon, and you dissuaded him of that very quickly.
Well, he was somewhat correct. 20 years ago, really bourbon wasn't being made outside of Kentucky, but that has since changed. Every state in this union produces bourbon pretty much now.
So what's the name on the bourbon?
Our name is Border Bourbon, and the reason why we call it Border Bourbon, as I said, there are 6 of us that now work at the facility, and 3 of us live in Wisconsin, 3 of us live in Minnesota. And if you have a Packer Viking weekend or a Minnesota Badger weekend, we call it Border Battle. And so that's how we came up with Border. And the little design on the front that represents the river that we cross every day to go to work.
And 45th Parallel, which is the name of the company, 45th Parallel Spirits. Yeah. The name came from where we're located.
Exactly. The 45th Parallel goes through right through the heart of Wisconsin and through the Minneapolis metro area, and goes through some of the most famous spirit regions in the world, Burgundy in France and Piedmont in Italy. Very famous restaurants are along that location.
You talk about Burgundy in France. I am amazed that we also have quite a few wineries that are cropping up in Wisconsin and Minnesota. I would not think that we had the climate for it.
They're getting better at it. The University of Minnesota has a lot to do with that. There are a lot of good research going on with grapes. There's 100 wineries in Wisconsin. Nobody would imagine
100 wineries in Wisconsin.
Yes, there's 100 wineries in Wisconsin. Wolsheim Winery down in Sauk Prairie won Winery of the Year last year, and it was the first non-California winery to do that. If you ever get a chance to go down there and tour their facility, they have a very impressive place. Their winery, actually, the gentleman that started that winery moved out to California, and I think he was the beginning of Napa area. And he was started that winery 150 years ago.
And Sharon and I toured Napa last summer, as a matter of fact, and I could not get over. You can't go 200 yards without hitting another winery.
Yes. Yeah, so there's a lot of good wine. St. Croix Vineyards was great. I went and toured their winery.
St. Croix Vineyards?
Yeah, St. Croix Vineyards. They pretty much sell most of their products out of their facility. They're by the apple orchard. I tasted their stuff, and it's really good. Really good. I would recommend going there.
Okay. Now, in the middle here, we have limoncello.
Yes.
Tell us what that's all about.
Well, actually, what I have displayed right now is an orange cello. We do have limoncello first. I mean, that's what we started making a couple of years ago. And the reason why I only have the orange cello here is because we haven't brought it here yet. And that's, I think it's kind of, has a little bit more flavor. It's relatively hearty.
Made with an orange base as opposed to a lemon base.
It's made the exact same way, but instead of a lemon, we use an orange. And but the lemon is more popular. We sell a lot of limoncello.
And then we have the rye.
The rye
is, I think, a first time here. We haven't seen the rye before.
Exactly. The rye whiskey is a fairly hearty whiskey. It's spicy, whereas the bourbon's a little bit more mellow, a little bit more sweet. So we probably sell 3 bottles of bourbon for every bottle of rye. But the people who buy the rye are whiskey drinkers. They're the people that's what they drink. They drink whiskey, and so they're looking for the rye. It's like a strong cup of coffee.
And then the aquavit. And for the aquavit, you should be sitting down when you drink it, and it really has a kick.
Well, to me, aquavit it's very similar to gin. It's made the same way that you would make a gin. Instead of juniper berries as the primary ingredient, it's caraway. So it's not a whole lot different. They tend to be a little bit higher proof, but so is premium gins are higher proof right now. So if you can handle a gin, you can handle an aquavit.
Now you're redesigning your website right now, and you have a really interesting website. One of the things on it is a diagram that everything is within 8 miles.
Yeah.
And I know that really is a big factor in the success that you are having. So explain what the 8-mile circle is about.
Well, when we started out, we needed to find a supplier of our grain. And we were fortunate enough to find one of the best farmers in the region. And he agreed to supply us our grain. He's about 8 miles from our facility. So in the beginning, we used to have to pick up the grain, but now they deliver it. They deliver the grain to our building, but we bring it back.
And the cows use it for food.
Yes, we take it back. Within a couple of weeks, we're done with the grain. It's shipped back to them in a truck, and we dump it, and it's cattle feed. And then the cattle consume that grain, and they have...
The cattle don't drink the liquor, I take it.
Well, there is a little bit of alcohol still in it, but not much. And alcohol doesn't tend to affect cattle like it would a pig. A lot of distilleries will bring their spent stillage to pig farms, but we don't have a lot of pig farms around where we're at. So it's an Angus beef farm.
We don't want a bunch of drunken pigs anyway in the area. So but very interesting.
Oh, good.
So the grain comes to you,
Yep.
locally grown, for instance, corn,
Yes.
and you have this really fascinating facility, which I urge people to go and visit. And you utilize the same equipment for the different drinks that you make.
Yeah, we're a small facility. Distilling equipment's expensive, and so what I can do is I can make a year's supply of vodka in about 3 months, and so then I go on to other things. So I'll make up a whole bunch of vodka. I'll put it in storage tanks, and then or bottle it, and then I start making bourbon. I'll make bourbon for about 4 or 5 months, and then I'll go on to rye whiskey and whatever else. Then we'll make some gin. So we tend to. So if you come to us, you might not see vodka, but it's similar. If you can make vodka, you can make whiskey.
And the process that you go through to scrub out your equipment is incredible.
Yeah.
Because you're utilizing the same equipment for the different liquors.
What we'll do is we use a caustic soda wash and then an acid wash, and then we rinse, and then we start over.
And the result is right in front of us.
Exactly.
So what's on the drawing board for the future?
Well, recently I attended a class because we have spent barrels, and I can't use them again for my whiskeys. So if I want to use them again, I have to make something else. And we are planning on rum. And so I got back a few weeks ago from Kentucky. I was learning about making rum.
Attention, Sharon Miller in the control room. They are planning on rum.
We'll make several different styles. We'll have aged, longer aged rum, and then short aged rum.
And it's interesting, of course, that you come up with different names for each of these products, but they're all 45th parallel spirits.
Yes, there is a French wine company called Parallel 45, and they don't want us using the 45th parallel name for other brands. They allow us to use it for our facility, our distillery, and we can use it for 45th parallel vodka, but we have agreed to. But we are consistent. Most of our product names are geographical. We have New Richmond Rye, we have Madison Avenue Limoncello, and Orangecello, which is our address. We're on Madison
You're on
Avenue.
Madison Avenue,
Exactly.
right.
And then we have Border Bourbon, and we'll have to figure out something out for the rum. I haven't decided yet.
Access to Democracy rum.
Okay.
And we'll feature that.
Yeah.
Now, you also give classes.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Well, in spring and in fall, I teach a class. I only do it twice a year. And so what we do is they go to our website and they discover that we do that, and it's advertised on the American Distilling Institute website also. And they call us up and they register, and they fly from all over. And I just had a guy call up today and ask me about my class. He's from Arizona. So, but more and more people in the Midwest are taking the class now.
We don't want any drunken Arizonas around. So it's now, you've recently been on WCCO, featured on WCCO,
Yeah.
on public radio, NPR,
Yeah.
on Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine. As your success story spreads, so does your fame.
Well, there's something romantic about the aged spirits. I think that had a lot to do with it too. You have people. Vodka is associated with, I think, Russia and Poland, but Americans they do have a romantic feeling about whiskey. So when we started bringing that out, we became more and more well known.
And awards, let's talk about them.
Well, we've gotten a couple awards for our vodka, mainly our vodka. Our vodka is received the most recognition. Our whiskeys are relatively young yet, but
The vodka was the premier. That was
Exactly.
the starter, really.
Yes.
And it did. It won at least 2 awards that I'm aware of.
yes, and it's consistently ranked up there. So our whiskeys, I'm going to start. We're getting to the age where I'm going to start entering them into some contest. There's a new organization out in this country that deals with experienced distillers, and so they'll be judged by other distillers. Well,
Much the same as wines often go into competitions.
yes,
I was not aware that hard liquor also goes into competitions.
there's many competitions. You can spend a lot of money because a lot of them require you to spend money to have them judged, and so we're picky about where we send our stuff. We tend to like to send our stuff to places that don't, more like Consumer Reports. They don't take advertising, so they're not influenced that way, and that's where we go.
Now, the taste of the vodka is pure. How do you maintain that taste? How do you ensure the purification? How do you really, what are the steps you take to make it so?
Well, our ingredients are consistent. I mean, our grain all comes from the same farm, and our yeast comes from the same place. Our carbon, also our filtration. If we do monitor our fermentations, the distilling process is the same. It is batch, so there is a slight variation from bottle to bottle. So depending on the batch you get. But as far as quality,
For purity, though, and quality, you are really fanatical about maintaining that, and that's what I wanted you to talk about.
Well, we do monitor everything ourselves. It has to get by us. And the distilling, we have equipment that is capable of distilling up to 192 proof, and that's about as high as you can distill up to. And when you do that, you're removing a lot of impurities. And so we have the equipment that's able to do that.
You're also removing a lot of conscious people if you're going
Yes.
to 192 proof.
Yes. Well, we remove impurities, and so what you have is you have a heart's cut, and the heart's cut is the center part of your distillate. And if you have a big heart's cut, you're going to be overlapping with some impurities, and that's industrial vodka. If you have a small heart's cut, you're sacrificing a lot, but you have a very clean spirit.
And that's what you get here
Yes.
with the smaller cut.
Yes.
In other words, you're not out there to compete with somebody that's doing a couple 100,000 bottles a year. You're out there for the quality of your product.
Yes, and those are computer generated distilleries, so they're not really monitored by an individual, where our distilling is monitored by individual distillers.
Somebody has to design the bottles,
Yes.
and somebody has to manufacture the bottles. Where do they come from?
Most of them come from the United States now. Our 45th Parallel vodka bottle still comes from France, and it's a French company that has very high quality. It's excellent glass. It's hard to beat, but you have to buy large quantities, and you have to buy shipping containers at a time. So it's not easy to do that, and it has to go through customs. You have to prepay. We are finding that more and more American glass manufacturers are starting to deal with small distillers like us because they see us as a market. So all the aquavits and the whiskey and the cello bottles all come from the United States now. They come from the Missouri area.
Well, it's great to have you back. We're going to have to get a larger table in the future as you branch out into more things. It's an interesting story. It's, as I said to start, it's the American success story, and there's nothing that we like to do more than trumpet the American success story. Think of how far you've come since you were first here in 2010, and we really have enjoyed watching you grow, enjoyed touring. I urge people, New Richmond, Wisconsin is where 45th Parallel Spirits is located. They have a great website, which is being improved at the moment, and ask for Paul Werni. He's right there, and he'll take you around himself. Any last thoughts for the viewers?
I just encourage you to come on out and try different things, and keep an open mind when you're out at a place, and ask the bartender or restaurant owner that if they have anything that's interesting that's maybe locally made.
45th Parallel Spirits, 45th Parallel Vodka. Paul Werni, thanks so much.
Well, thank
and
you.
we look forward to having you back again.
Thanks.